Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of day it is. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Dr. Don. For your first-time viewers, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of one-hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like most of you out there about who they are as unique, one-of-a-kind individuals and about whatever it is that we've decided to talk about. And tonight we're going to talk about what's important on today's date, March 8th, 2012. And my two guests this evening are quite interesting in their own right, and they seem a little bit different from the theme of the show. That's why we have a broad title called What's Important. And I want to introduce you to Leslie Grover, who is the business administrator at my dentist's office. And I wanted to tell you about this feeling that's and Mark White, my new friend, who is running for city commissioner here in Portland. And we'll hear some more about who you are, but I've got some words here about Mark, and I'll tick them off, if I may, okay? Position number 4 for city commissioner. You're the president of the Powell-Hearst Gilbert Neighborhood Association, co-chair of Portland Charter Review Commission. Oh, there's so many. You can tell us about them when you get to you, okay? Now, as you know, the show goes usually in 2 major segments, where the first half is where I ask about who you are, what I call the bio segment. And then we'll get in the second half about why you're running for city commissioner and what exciting stories you can tell us about your patients in the office where you administer.
Right.
So how are you feeling right now?
Good.
And you had some traffic difficulty getting over here?
Yes.
I did too, yeah.
Bumper to bumper on Bamfield. Yeah.
How about you?
No, actually, I live in East Portland, so I just took division.
Well, that's cheating.
I know.
I had to come from Beaverton.
I know.
Yeah. And are you as nervous as I am?
No, no.
You're not nervous?
No, not really.
Well, I hate people like you.
I've done a number of candidate interviews, and over the course of the last, I don't know, probably month or so, I've gotten a bit more comfortable talking with folks.
Oh, very good. Yeah, you look pretty comfortable. And Leslie, you look relaxed too. Are you okay?
Yeah, I talk to people all day long. And you know, people come into the dental office very nervous. So part of my job is to sort of mellow them out and, you know, talk people into feeling more comfortable. So, yeah.
Just now my shoulders dropped as I heard you say that. You have a soothing way about you. You're a pro.
Oh, yeah.
So let's get started. I have a sort of a cheat sheet that I will follow somewhat. And if I ask you a question that you don't want to answer, well, just tell me I get lost or I'm not going to answer that, okay?
Okay.
But these are pretty much generic questions. Like I'll ask you, I want to tell you also, somewhere along the way I'll ask you a trick question. And I always have one trick question for each guest. And I can ask you now or somewhere along the way and surprise you. When shall I ask you your trick question?
Well, it wouldn't be a trick question unless you kind of tricked us when you were going to ask it.
Okay, let's
Right, that's a good response. Right.
let's start with you, Leslie. What's your full name?
Leslie Grover.
Is there
No middle name.
No middle name?
No.
Why is that?
Because my mother didn't believe in middle names. I don't know. She seemed to have come from a family with people who had lots of extra names and just decided that life was simpler if you only had 2.
Mm-hmm. And I was about to say when, but don't ask the woman when. But where were you born?
I was born in England.
Uh-huh. And why were you born?
Why was I born?
That's your trick question.
That is it. No, isn't that?
Did you have an answer for that? About why you were born?
Why was I born? Well, I could speculate.
People usually are stuck with that question, and it's interesting the answers I get after you think for a moment. Do you have an answer for that?
Well, it was the end of the war, and I think my parents were young, and they were hopeful that life would be new, and that we would go forward with more human respect for one another, and so they were interested in bringing new life into the world, and here I came. They had 4 sisters that followed me.
So I bet you got some stories about those times, huh?
I do.
Yeah. And anything significant about your cultural heritage that would be of interest to the viewers, other than the fact that you're English or British?
Interest. You know, I don't know. All I can think is what I know about, you know, my life. I've always been torn between the country of birth and living here in America. And so I go back and forth. I usually visit England once a year. Last year I went 3 times. I always said that later in life, if something happened to my husband, I would go back. Never felt totally settled here, but I now have 2 American grown daughters and American grandchildren, and I've made my life here. So I don't see myself going back. But whenever I go back to England, it feels to me like I was a saltwater fish that had been made to live in a tropical tank, and I go back to England and it feels like I've been put back in salt water. So I just go, it's hard to explain.
But it feels good?
But it feels good.
Yeah.
I feel I probably was British for many, many lifetimes. I feel grounded there. It's not that I don't feel that way in America. It's just that America just doesn't feel completely native. I don't think it ever will.
You think of any specific reasons for that? Perhaps you don't.
Yes, I can think of very specific things, actually. The food, for one thing. When I'm in England, my body feels better because I'm eating English food. And I think it's because the food that you grow up with, your body develops the digestive enzymes necessary to digest it. And then when your body can adapt to other foods later in life. But when I go back to England and I'm eating English butter and drinking English milk and eating English bread, my body feels more at ease,
More harmony.
more in harmony.
Yeah.
I've heard of people bringing like children over from Africa who can't digest American food and they have to have their own native grain at first, and I think there is something to that. I still feel more comfortable physically eating food when I'm in England. The other thing I miss is the sense of humor, the British humor. The British have a wonderful way of laughing at themselves, and sometimes I think Americans take themselves very seriously, and then I think, sometimes I miss the humor, just that, you know, that.
Yes. Dry.
Dry, yeah.
When did you leave England?
Well, I left England twice. In 1959, I was only 13, and my parents immigrated, and we came as a family. My parents stayed, and I went back at 17, and never really wanted to come back to America. I didn't. But at age 23, I came again, and met my husband, and I'm still here, which so that was in 1969. So I have to say I probably lived equal number of years in both countries, a mixture.
Yeah.
But,
do you have a religious preference? Is that an appropriate question?
do I have a religious preference?
Some people do and some don't.
Well, I'd have to say I have a pretty universal religious preference. I was raised a Methodist. My dad was a Methodist minister. And then,
I'm a humanist minister.
Are you?
Yes.
Good.
I got a wedding coming up this Friday again, so yeah. So I know what ministers are like,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, so you know what it is to be part of a minister's family. That's how I grew up. Yeah.
And how about your formal education?
Well, I trained as a nurse in London after I finished high school here in America, and then went back lived in London, did my nurse's training there, and did the equivalent of the British SRM, which is the same as the American RN. But I've always been an artist, so my education has always expanded into art classes, and so I'm a mixture.
I knew you'd be interesting. A nurse and artist. What kind of art do you do?
Well, I paint, and I do pen and ink drawing, and I like to do illustration. I like to do very large canvases with bright, almost impressionistic images, and also like to do small watercolors. I've recently been working on a botanical illustration of plants. I love to just get into all the detailed bits of plants and put them into my work. And sometimes I just throw it all together and do mixed media, which is a bit of everything on the same page. So.
What does your husband think of your multi-talents?
Well, my husband passed away 4 years ago.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's all right.
Yeah.
And he was my biggest fan. He was always saying, "Why don't you do more? Why don't you do more with it?" And he was very supportive in that way. So, but I've always worked as well, and raised a family, and had to balance everything. So
yeah. And children? You have two.
I have two grown
children?
girls
Mm-hmm.
and two wonderful son-in-laws.
Mm-hmm.
My eldest daughter has two children, a boy and a girl, 9 and 11. They live out in Lake Oswego. And then I have a younger daughter who lives out by University of Portland, North Portland, and they just had a brand new baby who's 4 months old, just a delight. So I have 3
Of course, you're
grandkids.
very objective about that
Yeah.
assessment, aren't you? Do you have a particular political persuasion, or you don't have a political persuasion? You're left, right, center, or moderate, or what?
Well, I'm not an American citizen, so I can't vote. So I won't be able to vote for you, Mark. But I have to say I was raised by my mother was a very strong socialist, and always advocated for the fairness of humanity, that she couldn't understand why some people would want to own 3 houses while there were people living on the streets, that kind of thing. She took it to an extreme. Because I've lived in different countries and have experienced different political arrangements, and I feel much more universal than I could never limit myself, I don't think, to the 2-party system that exists in this country. But
You're pretty broad. How about memberships in any political or social organizations that are worth mentioning? Civic organizations. Some people have memberships, thousands of them, and some have none.
Yeah, no, the Oregon Society of Artists is what I.
Yes, that's of
my.
interest, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I support the Oregon. I support the Art Museum. I'm a member of the Art Museum, and I guess that's where I gravitate. I like the company of other artists, and I like to support art.
Of course.
Yeah.
And how about persons from the past or alive today, one or more, that you particularly admire or look up to? Any names come to mind?
You mean I have to pick one?
You don't have to pick any. You don't have to pick any.
I don't have to pick any.
Sometimes, like I've got probably a half dozen, I'll tick right off because I've been doing this for so long. You know?
I have to say I've been really fortunate to have met some amazing people
Really?
in my lifetime. And,
Any of them left a long impression as fine individuals or whatever, influence your way of thinking, your philosophy?
Wow. Yes. I have a great aunt. No, I have an aunt, well, she's my aunt. She's 92. And there probably isn't a day goes by where I don't reflect on something she said or something she taught me in life. And there's nothing famous about her. She was a school teacher and she raised a family of 6 sons. But she taught me at a very young age to expand my thinking and to reach for follow my passions and to delve into things that interested me, to explore all religions, to understand all different age groups. She's still alive. She's in a nursing home in England, and she's the reason that I went back to England 3 times last year, because I want to spend as much time with her at this end of her life. When I think about all the famous people and all the people that I've read, and if I had to pick one person, I would pick her. And she's just a very dear, sweet, wonderful soul.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, shall we make some time for Mark?
Yes. Oh, yes. I really want to hear about Mark now.
I don't know. It's been absolutely wonderful listening to you.
You're very gracious.
Very ordinary.
Yeah.
No, not at all. Extraordinarily fascinating.
Yes. Shall I ask you the questions one at a time, or do you remember them all?
No, go ahead.
What's your full name?
Full name, Mark Randall White.
Randall. How'd you get that middle name?
The same as my father's.
Oh,
Yeah, spelled one L.
okay. And I can ask you when you were born, because you're not a woman. When and where were you born?
When? 1959, August 13th. Where? San Jose, California.
Californian. Okay, yeah. Anything significant about your national or cultural heritage worth repeating?
Let's see. I'm part 1/4 Portuguese.
So that's what we're saying.
Yeah.
1/4 French, 1/4 Danish, and the rest is anyone's guess.
My God. You sure you weren't raised and brought up in New Orleans?
I don't know.
Because I've got everything.
There's all kinds of rumors. Cherokee. I don't know. Just anything you can imagine is probably in there. I'm guessing.
Yeah. A religious preference for you?
No, I was raised Catholic, but have
I've been there, done that.
I would probably say I consider myself to just be spiritual, and connect more to perhaps a Native American kind of perception of spirituality.
What do you mean by spiritual?
Just trying to be as in tune as I possibly can with the planet in which I live and the people that are in my life, and just really kind of doing the best that I can from day to day. Really not much more than that. I think life is...
That's enough.
Yeah, it's what you make it, and I think it has to have meaning, so...
Yeah, it's interesting. Depends on the person I ask the question. That's it. Oftentimes they're stumped and they say, I'm spiritual, but they don't know what it means. But you said in a few words what was pretty clear to me what's meant by spiritual. Yes.
Good.
Very good. You're going to be as good on the next question or not?
I hope so.
I'm sure you will. And your education, your formal education?
Formal education, I graduated high school in California. I took a couple years off. I was quite rebellious when I was young. And finally, when things kind of settled down for me, I went back to business college, and the quick, 9-month business college, and that was the extent of my education.
Yeah, okay. And do you have a partner?
Yes, been together. It'll be 8 years in June.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And any children?
No, my late partner actually had 2 children. I've not talked to them since he died too much. The youngest lived with me for a couple of years after, but she's moved on. She has a child of her own now, and I don't really see her very often, if at all.
Are you available now?
Am I available now?
So the viewers, I want to tell them if you're available or not, because I think you would be a pretty attractive catch for somebody.
No. My partner and I have been together almost 8 years. Sorry.
You're right. And how would you characterize your political persuasion?
Clearly left of center. When I was growing up, I always kind of thought I was a socialist, but I tend to be very fiscally responsible because I think that, anyone I believe who considers themselves to be liberal really needs to pay attention to the bottom line as far as dollars are concerned, because any money that we save here can be used over here. So if we save $30 million here, that's affordable housing, that's roads being paved, that's all kinds of social services. So
I think you're still a socialist, aren't you?
probably.
Yeah.
But I'm registered and have been for a number of years, independent, non-affiliated. Yeah, because I'm not too fond of the two-party monopoly, or actually it's a duopoly, wouldn't it be? And I'm very much in favor of third parties and try to vote that way if I can.
And someone suggested there's only one party, it's the corporate party, and there's 2 wings of it, the Democrats and Republicans. Oops.
I'm certainly not going to argue with that.
How about memberships in political, social, or other organizations worth mentioning that the viewers would be curious about you?
I joined a bowling league last year. That's really about the extent of it socially. I tend to be more of a private person. I like to be at home. I like to work outside in the yard. I have a half-acre lot, and I've got like 12.5 fruit trees and tons of room for a lot more stuff. So I'm trying really hard to focus on that. But I also have a couple of rental units, and tenants always get attention first. So
Yes.
their stuff gets taken care of first, and if there's any time left for me, then I do that.
Okay. How about persons from the past or alive today? Any one name or more than one comes to mind that you look up to or respect a lot?
Yeah, I probably would have to say my best friend. Yeah, we were actually colleagues. I worked at a medical education company for 11.5 years. She moved here from Atlanta to join the company, and we formed a friendship. And I find her to be just a really interesting person. She's a single parent, incredibly intelligent. I think she could probably teach at Mensa. But she's incredibly passionate and very empathic and compassionate. She has all of these qualities, and she's just very thoughtful. And when I think of what it means to be a human being, I kind of see it all kind of wrapped up in her. And I would, very much try to aspire to be as good and thoughtful as she is at everything that she does.
What a high compliment.
Yeah, she's the type of person that we'll have lunch together, and she'll send me a thank you note saying, it was wonderful to speak to you and that kind of stuff. Really just a incredible, pleasant person, and super intelligent and very thoughtful at the same time. So, yeah.
A light went on when you said empathy as one of her qualities. I don't know, lately that's been a big thing for me to check the degree to which a person can be empathetic. That's, I'm not sure how useful it is for you, but I like empathy. Yeah. And what do you do to earn a living?
Well, I own 2 properties. I have the property in which I live on. Like I said, it's half an acre. I built a small duplex on it a couple of years ago, and in the basement I've converted into living space. So I rent those 3 out, and then I own a small house across the street, so I rent that out. It's not enough to pay my bills, but I've made some very intentional choices that kind of have left me with little to no discretionary income, and I'm not sure if I did that part intentionally, but it was very much along the lines of, I need to do these things for myself in order to be happy in my life, and I'm willing to live off nothing in order to do that. It's possible that if I don't win the election, that I'll have to get a job just so I can refinance my house and be able to continue to do the things that I'm doing. But my life experiences have kind of brought me to a point where I realize that my life needs to have meaning. And if I don't do what's important to me, then it's not really worth living. You know?
Of course.
Yeah.
And you're doing now what's important for you.
For me, right now what's important is the immediate community in which I live. I live in East Portland, and we were annexed about 20, 30 years ago. And since that time, there's been such profound, profound change. One of the best examples I can give folks is that 15 years ago, the free or reduced lunch rate in the David Douglas School District was about 38%. Now it's about 80%. Really just a profound change in a short period of time. And there's incredible diversity now in our neighborhood. There's 76 different languages spoken in the high school. And that's happened in a very, very short period of time too. We're kind of, since so many properties are so affordable, we're like the last bastion for affordability when it comes to housing in the city of Portland. So if you can't really afford to live anywhere within the city, the place you're going to end up is in or around where my neighborhood is. So when the city annexed us in, they actually changed the zoning, and they added multifamily zoning along many of our streets, and it's like blocks deep. So within a short period of time, we became the most populated neighborhood in the city. And the things that really concern me are like all of those things that are going on, but we also have not a single major street with contiguous sidewalks. We have 6 of the 16 most dangerous intersections in the city of Portland. We have more unpaved roadways than any other neighborhood in the entire city. And just these horrific gaps in infrastructure and the level of poverty and unemployment. Like, for example, the neighborhood is divided in between 2 zip codes, and the first and second highest numbers of foreclosures are in those 2 zip codes. We have East Portland as a whole has like 75% of all the residential care facilities in Portland. So there's just been this massive gravitation of poverty and unemployment. Communities of color are now the majority in the area and have been for a number of years. So.
I'm getting a lesson here about what's going on in that part of Portland.
Yeah, and I think it's actually something that a lot of folks don't really realize of how dramatically things have changed in such a short period of time. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that this zoning came in, and the city essentially changed the zoning and then gave all these incentives for housing to be built and people to move in, but never came back to fix the sidewalks or any of those kinds of things. So.
Yeah, well, I was a little awkward because usually I'm in that chair and I can see when they're putting up signs for me, so I'm paying attention to you and glancing back to see when they're going to give me a sign saying it's break.
Yeah.
But I just saw the sign, so I better take a break or they're going to yell at me. All right?
Okay.
So the mics will be off in a few minutes. Let's take a break. Put up a couple of signs for the viewers, and we'll wait. Okay, we are back. Now, I've got to do something here after the break. For you viewers who missed the opening of the show, Conversations with Dr. Don is an ongoing series of 1 hour standalone talk shows where I interview interesting people like my two guests here tonight about who they are personally and whatever it is we've decided to talk about. And as you're learning, as we're going about our discussion, things are coming up and we're going to talk about them and having a good time too. So during the break, you asked a question, and I thought, save that so we can put it on the air for the viewers to see. What did you ask Leslie? You said something about, "Bah, you're a fascinating or interesting person," or something like that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Oh, when he mentioned about if he'd met me just walking down the street,
Oh,
he
yes.
wouldn't have
Okay.
known all these things.
Uh-huh.
But I think that's interesting you should say that, Mark, because it's true of the whole world, isn't
Yes.
it? We don't take time
Yes.
to really talk and let people speak about themselves and what they're feeling, what their passions are. And I think if we did it more, I think the world is a fascinating place, full of fascinating people. And I think the idea of a talk show is great. I like the idea of a talk show.
I love it. I love it. I'm gonna keep doing it till I can hardly stand. Because if somebody seems interesting, just after a few minutes of conversation, I'll invite him to come on the show. It can be a pizza maker, a truck driver, a philosopher, a medical doctor, or whatever. And I've only missed it a couple of times in 12 years. But almost, I didn't quite miss it. I had one guest who, it turns out, I thought he was one thing politically, and after just about 30 seconds, that turned out he was the other thing politically. He was a John Birch Society member, and I thought he was a screaming leftist liberal.
Oh my gosh.
But and he was a professional. He'd run around the country addressing audiences about his views politically and on social issues. But I managed him. But I enjoy this very much, and I can tell you enjoy it too. And what your face and your eyes say, not just your whole persona, when we're talking about something, it says something about you and you're interested. And as I say, people are interesting if you're interested, and you both have that quality. So let's talk some more about why it is you're running for city commissioner, Mark, can we?
Sure.
You want to talk about what you've got here or what? I'll just...
Well, actually, what's there is just a really quickie introduction for folks to let them know that that I do have some local experience in commissions and boards, and it's actually quite varied. I've sat on the Housing Commission. I've been co-chair of the Charter Commission, which is always a wonderful subject for me to talk about. I was on the Portland-Multnomah Food Policy Council. My neighborhood has a couple of what the federal government considers to be food deserts. So
Food deserts.
yeah.
Speak a little slowly for me.
Sure. So a food desert essentially is an area where people have are considered not to have adequate access to food and are considered to be food insecure. And it's actually quite ironic because our neighborhood has so many large lots that are perfect for urban agriculture. And it's one of the things that I've tried to do is to try and move the city's perception of our part of the city as a place to house people as opposed to growing food.
And that's going on now in Portland.
Actually, throughout the city, yes.
Throughout the city. And I'm from white bread Beaverton, so I don't know what's really going on in the rest of the city. And I've only been here, about 15 years? I should know more.
Well, there's a zoning code update going on with regard to food, and part of that is going to make some changes and make it easier for people to grow food and to sell food that they grow on their properties and lots of different things. It'll address the farmers markets and the food carts and a couple other things because there's really not a lot of code for food-related stuff right now.
Mm-hmm. So what else are you going to do for your constituencies if you are on the commission or you win the election?
Well, I think the main thing for me really is the fact that I've been so influenced by the level of poverty that exists within my neighborhood and my part of the city that I I'm hoping to take like the route of the former president of Brazil, and I absolutely love to say his name.
Lula?
Yeah, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, because he's part Portuguese.
I think it's terrific.
Yeah, but by focusing on, you know, the country's most vulnerable citizens, he helped lift 20 million people out of poverty, but also helped, you know, propel Brazil to being the sixth largest, you know, economy on the planet.
Better be careful. You sound like Al Qaeda. They're going to come for you, Homeland Security.
But when you think about it, it's a really good example of when you do the right thing that
Yes.
everyone benefits.
Yes.
And to me, that's what we need to do. We need to focus on folks who are the most vulnerable, who really need employment in order to be self-sustaining and to support themselves and their families. And I think by doing that, then everyone else will benefit and we'll all kind of move together as one. And so that's really what I want to focus on the most is job creation and economic development, especially for folks that are kind of been left out, you know, historically.
How is it that we have this situation existing now in Portland and in many other parts of the country where there's a food deserts and that sort of thing? Why is that our system has caused this to happen?
Well, I think part of it is actually just planning. I think probably when my neighborhood was annexed into the city and they changed the zoning, I think they probably were thinking that it was a good thing that they had all of these people in one place so they would have access to transportation because there's, you know, it's a major street and there's lots of, you know, access to buses and things like that.
What's a major street?
122nd, but there's actually a number of streets that have multifamily zoning on them. But what's ironic is that the way things turned out is that when these new buildings were put in, the sidewalks weren't connected. So, for example, I have around the corner from my house, I have a residential care facility, and it's got like 30 folks who are, you know, 65 and older, and there's no sidewalks on either side. So the folks who are dependent on mobility devices, if no one comes and picks them up and take them someplace, they're stranded there. They don't go anywhere. There's another affordable housing complex not too far from there that has 37 units, but it has like 176 people who live there, and about 124 of them are children. So it has this you know, density issue that downtown you have, you know, multi-story buildings, and it could have 50 units and not have nearly as many people as this one place that has all these children in it. So it's just this incredible disparity that exists within our city, and some of it just is really just planning. And the fact that the city came in, made these changes, and just kind of assumed that everything would work out, and just kind of left and didn't bother to check in. And it took people like myself and other activists who basically said, you know what? Poverty is out of control here. There's shootings and all kinds of stuff that's going on. There's no sidewalks. Just incredible amounts of damage is being done to the quality of life here. And if you don't step up, then it's just going to get worse. And it's going to bring down the entire city. And sometimes I think it's almost like when the city did this, it was kind of like someone who adopts a child and says, well, we actually didn't really think through this adoption thing. And for us to be able to continue to eat portions the same size that we have been, you're going to have to go without. So here's a glass of water. We're going to have dinner. You go sit over there. So they made these changes and they brought all this stuff on, and then they just left and kind of left us to our own. And it's very unfortunate. I mean, it has like 25% of the population of the city now.
Is it as simple as negligence, or is there some behavior on the part of the business and the government? Is it negligence, or?
I don't.
That's a leading question.
I don't necessarily think that it's negligence, but I think part of the problem really is that because of the fact that folks have been kind of lied to as far as what was going to come their way after annexation, there's a lot of apathy, and people just don't vote. And if you don't vote, then no one really cares about you. Mm-hmm. So you don't have a voice at the table, and people who have the voice at the table are going to get stuff. So it's the reason why there was all this attention to the Columbia River crossing, and why they talked about having a streetcar to Lake Oswego and a sustainability center that's not going to pencil out unless, you know, planning and sustainability staff move into it. all these things that really have nothing to do with the vast majority of the city are all happening because we don't have a voice at the table. And the folks who are most vulnerable have to have a voice at the table.
Who are you? Go ahead.
Why do you think people don't vote, Mark? Why don't they vote?
I think-
Is voting complicated?
No. Well, let me give you an example. In East Portland, at one point, folks had voted to not be a part of the city. They voted to be their own city.
Okay.
And it passed, but the city of Portland challenged it, and it went to, I don't know what level of the federal system it went to, but ultimately what happened was the court said that it was okay that you could be your own city, but they had no way to enforce it, so the city of Portland annexed them anyway. So it's this, it doesn't really matter if I vote because you're just going to do whatever you want anyway.
I see.
So I think it's a matter of really, it's rebuilding trust, because if there's no trust, there's no relationship. And that's with individuals, and I think it goes the same way with government. And I think that's the thing that the city of Portland has failed to do, is to build the trust with these communities that were annexed. And that's both East Portland, Southwest Portland, and a couple of others.
Who's the competition for the seat you're running for?
Steve Novick, Jerry Williams, and there's a couple of people who filed kind of at the last minute that I'm not familiar with their names. I think one of them's name is Brian Parrott. He's, from what I understand, he's very big in Major League sports and stuff like that. So he was very wanting to bring Major League Baseball or something like that here. I just read it very, very quickly, so I'm not really sure.
Do you think they would be as effective in that spot as you will be?
I've not met them. My concern really is Steve, and Steve Novick is, he's a veteran Democratic strategist. He ran for Senate against Merkley and did actually quite well. But he has no local ties. He's never really been connected to the local community. All of his stuff has been state or federal. And he's got a number of things that he wants to do that aren't really even connected to the city itself. So, for example, he wants to work on healthcare, he wants to work on education, and he wants to work on corrections. And the city really has no authority over any of those things. Yeah. And if you think about the fact that I'm not sure if it's 1 in 5 Oregonians, or at least 500,000 Oregonians are living in poverty. And if you translate that to Portland, that's well over 100,000, probably 125,000 folks in Portland alone that are living in poverty. And we have to have city council members who are focused on the here and now and not kind of doing their own personal agenda and things that they like to do. You know, he's really into healthcare, he's really into education. And there are ways that we can support education, but we also have duly elected school boards who kind of run our school districts. So we need to do whatever we can to support them so they can do their job.
You're causing me a problem. Steve Novick has been on my show twice,
Really?
and he's a terrific human being. And I hardly know you, and just my experience in you and your sincerity and your genuineness and your capacity for empathy says you're of similar quality, if I may. So if I had I can't vote for you in your district, but I would have a hard time choosing between you and Steve. You haven't met Steve yet?
Yeah, I've met him a couple of times.
Yeah, he's a delightful human being.
He's very interesting, that I will give him.
And you're going to win your election?
I certainly hope so. Steve is, of course, he's very entrenched in the Democratic Party, so he's connected to all kinds of money. I've got probably, right now I've got like $1,100, and I think he's probably got 150 grand to 200,000.
Oh, man.
So there's a big disparity there, but no one else in the race has any kind of money compared to him.
What about campaign finance reform? Can we get it down to your level?
It's not going to happen until the Charter Commission comes back online. I'm sure once the Charter Commission comes back online, that'll be a very big topic of discussion. The last Charter Commission only had like 6 months. That got extended a little bit, but there was just not enough time to be able to work on something of that level.
Is this your first time running for public office?
Actually, it's the third. The last time I ran was 1998, so it was quite a long time ago.
You've got some experience, huh?
A little bit. Things have changed quite a bit. I actually decided that I didn't want to run the last time that I ran, and it actually had to do with money, because I was being interviewed by the Willamette Week, and I was there with an activist from Southwest Portland. And the Willamette Week interview says, so the two major folks each have $100,000, and you don't have any money, and you have no chance of winning. So who do you plan on voting for? So it wasn't like, what's important to you? Why are you running? What issues do you think are important? It was like, very, very dismissive, and it really made me think that, that money really kind of dictates everything. And I don't think that's the case anymore. I mean, with the advent of social media and the internet and other things, you don't need a lot of money, I think, to win an election. You just need to be able to connect to people and find a way to do that.
Whoa, now I've been waiting for a fight here. What's going on the national level for the presidency? Money isn't important in elections and politics? Help me out here.
To win locally.
Oh.
To win locally.
Okay. No fight.
No. No, I mean, the fact with the super PACs and all of that,
yeah.
Major problem.
Yeah.
Major problem. And I think it's indicative of how we've allowed essentially our democracy to become bought and paid for. Because it's not about issues anymore. It's not about things that are important to people. It's about who can raise the most money to keep the other one from getting any kind of solid ground.
Yeah. Let's talk to Leslie a little bit more because we've got 10 minutes left and about 5 minutes or so for a conversation. You have any questions for her anymore?
No, I'm just...
I have some questions
Yes.
for Mark because
Go ahead.
I'm very ignorant. I don't know what a city commissioner does. I'm not quite sure. If you go to work, if you say you were elected and you've got your agenda and things you're excited and passionate about, and you then have an office, I assume, you go in and sit down. What do you do?
Well, it depends. In Portland, we have a commission form of government. And in our commission form of government, the mayor assigns bureaus to the commissioners. So he or she may say, I want you to work on transportation. You're going to take the Office of Neighborhood Involvement. You have the Water Bureau. You have Bureau of Environmental Services. And those individuals are supposed to oversee those bureaus. Now, historically, what seems to happen is these commissioners believe that they have the ability and the authority to manage them, the day-to-day machinations of them. And that's where we've kind of run into problems, I think. So for me, I hope to, for example, I hope to institute participatory budgeting. So I would let the public identify and prioritize what they think my bureau should be doing, and then I would hold the director and staff accountable to make sure those things happen, and that would allow me the ability to work on more citywide issues. Again, job creation and economic development and those kinds of things.
So how would you do that? How would you get the public to do that? How would you get...
You mean as far as the participatory budgeting? Yeah. You go to them. The city has
you go door to door. What do you do? You speak.
Well, right now we have a neighborhood association system.
Yeah.
So there's 95 neighborhoods in the city. Each one of them has their own neighborhood association. It's a individual entity, and its goal or mission is to do outreach to the people in their neighborhood. So that system is already set up. Unfortunately, it's very underfunded. So in order to make it to be really effective, we need to give enough money for these folks to actually do their job. So for example, my neighborhood, most populated neighborhood in the city, it has almost 11,000 households. We get less than $2,500 per year to do outreach to all those folks and to reach all those different languages, so 76 different languages.
And that is taxpayers' money.
Yes.
And so who makes that decision? Is that the mayor's office? Who makes the decision how much money comes your way?
The budget season it's almost year round. So as soon as one budget ends, then they kind of start putting things together for the next year's budget. And it's kind of, there's certain things right now that are considered mission critical. So those things, their budget is kind of already covered. And then there's a little bit above that. And at least the way I understand it, it's the commissioner who decides what those additional things are. So, and then there's one-time funding for stuff, but everything comes out of the general fund, other than ratepayer money for like Water and Bureau of Environmental Services.
So can you campaign for more money? Can you say, I need more money for mine
Well,
project?
there's definitely negotiation that goes on.
Oh,
So you have to have a
okay.
really good relationship with the mayor and the other commissioners, probably.
Ah, I see. So is this sort of like an old boys club? You know, I've helped you, so you help me now.
Kind of, sort of, yeah. And that's
Is it
kind of
kinda
the
like
problem.
that? Isn't
That's
that the
kind of the
problem?
problem, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's where
Good.
participatory budgeting comes in, because it allows the public to decide what happens.
Ah,
And then if they want to spend money on other things, then I think it's incumbent upon government to find the money to do that, whether that's a levy or a bond or to take away from something else.
That's a dangerous term you're using there, participatory. That sounds like socialism.
Yeah, kind of, sort of. Kind of, sort of.
it's right up my alley.
I belong to the Democratic Socialists of America.
Do you?
Have you heard about Rocky Anderson? He's a
Right.
former mayor of Salt Lake City, Utah, who's starting a new Justice Party. And it's active in Washington State, and we're about to set up an Oregon branch of the Justice Party USA.
What will they do?
Rocky
What do they-
Anderson. It's an alternative to the Democratic and Republican parties. And even though Rocky Anderson's from the Mormon state, his credentials are absolutely pristine as far as liberal and social responsibility views on what's going on. And thank you very much. 5 minutes.
Just when it's getting
And
interesting.
it's going to get catching on. It's going to.
Yeah?
We got to have some place to go other than these two crazy parties. And what's your party affiliation? You're independent.
Independent, non-affiliated, yeah. I don't know how long. It's got to be over a decade, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But anyhow, where was I with that? Anyhow, we have about 5 minutes left. How about some closing thoughts or comments for the viewers that you think they would like to know about you or what you've said so far? Either one of you. Who's going to go first?
Go ahead.
Oh, well, I think I think we should have another session where we interview Don.
Oh.
I think he's probably a wealth of information.
Been there. I have a friend of mine who interviewed me some years ago about my childhood in New Orleans and growing up in my life. And after the first hour, the crew said, "That was so nice. You should do some more." So we did some more a month later. And when that was done, they said, "How about another round?" We had pictures, so 3 hours of video memoir of a New Orleans Creole.
Wonderful.
And if you're really nice, I'll let you see one.
Okay. I'd like to. That would be interesting. Yeah.
So what do you have to say to the viewers that would be useful for them?
What do I have to say? I don't know. I think from what I hear tonight, I think people should think about voting for Mark, don't you?
Yes.
I learned some things.
Okay,
I
Mark,
thought it was really
how about
interesting.
you? What do you got to say for viewers?
Well, actually, we were talking before,
Yes.
and I would say that probably the best thing that people can do is just vote. And it really doesn't matter who they vote for, because you have to have some kind of civic engagement. People need to really be a part of the community in which they live. And voting is a really good step in doing that. And if you have the time to get involved somehow, whether that's with the schools, with a nonprofit organization, with your neighborhood association, whatever it is that you want to do, somehow be a part of the community in which you live.
Participate.
Yeah, yeah. Because democracy really isn't a spectator sport. It actually functions best when there's very active participation.
Did you just create that, or are you repeating what somebody said to you? Democracy is
Not a spectator sport. No, it's something I thought about quite a long time ago, because it just, it kind of gets back to the apathy that we were talking
Yes.
about.
We were prior
Yeah.
to this session, we were waiting outside. We were talking about why people don't vote. Here we are in this wonderful democracy with the freedom to vote, where so many people don't have that freedom across the world.
I'm going to have to stop you now, because they're
Yeah.
going to yell at me for going over
Okay.
time. It's close to time for us to stop visiting and get ready to say goodnight. Keep those pens and pencils handy. We'll be able to show you something in the closing credits that you want to make note of. I have a few public service announcements I'd like to tell you about. The Getting Dr. Don show, local broadcast schedule. Go to my website, www.donbaham.com, and click on present day activities. And the next slide is To watch my shows on the web, go to my website again, www.donbay. Uh-oh, they were hurrying me up here. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. Oh man, without the ACLU, I don't know where we'd be without civil liberties in this country. So go to the ACLU and learn how you can be part of the movement to protect our civil liberties. Now, to get Dr. Don Show's broadcast by other stations, ask your local public access station to go to www.pegmedia.org. And I want to tell you about ending corporate personhood. Learn how to end corporate personhood. Go to www.movetoamend.org. It's critically important that we eliminate corporate personhood. We need to amend the Constitution to reverse the Citizens United decision that has us in such terrible condition right now as far as the national election is concerned and the amount of money with super PACs that are buying our representatives in the, for the corporate usage. Okay? So, I want to thank you for watching. Remember, KFC, not Kentucky Fried Chicken. Dr. Don's KFC, kind, friendly, and charitable. Be kind, be friendly, and be charitable to you too. And you, and you, and you. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.